Remember when a single summer felt like it would never end? That wasn't your imagination. Your brain was genuinely processing time differently. Here's the unsettling part. If you're 30 years old right now, by one model of perception, you may have already experienced over half of your felt life. The decades ahead won't just pass faster, they'll compress until whole years barely register. But the science behind why time speeds up as we age goes far deeper than most people realize, and it begins with a deceptively simple fraction. To an 8-year-old child, a single year represents a massive 12.5% of their entire existence. The summer stretch between school terms feels like an epoch because it occupies such a giant portion of their lived memory. But as the odometer of life turns, that denominator grows. By age 20, that same 12-month block shrinks to just 5% of your past. By the time you reach 60, a year represents a mere 1.7% of your lifespan. This math reveals how our minds implicitly measure the present. We do not evaluate time in a vacuum. Instead, the brain constantly compares current intervals against the total backdrop of everything we have already lived. To a child, a month is a major territory of life. To an older adult, it is a brief blip on a very long timeline. Author and neuroscientist Daniel Levitin noted that our brains scale these temporal blocks relative to the overall size of our history. A year does not physically shrink, but its relative value drops continuously. It is a simple, intuitive calculation happening beneath our conscious awareness. But does this fraction tell the whole story? If our perception of time were purely mathematical, the acceleration would feel smooth and predictable. Yet most people experience sudden, erratic shifts, where certain years vanish instantly while others linger. To find out why, we must look beyond simple arithmetic and examine how the physical brain records our days. While this mathematical model elegantly fits on a graph, our actual experience of life refuses to be bound by simple division. If time accelerated in a strict, predictable ratio, every single day of your 45th year would pass at the exact same rhythm. But it doesn't. A week spent waiting for critical medical results can feel like an agonizing eternity, while an entire month of routine office work disappears in what feels like a weekend. Consider extreme cases. When Spanish athlete Beatriz Flamini spent 500 days isolated inside a cave, she emerged believing only 160 days had passed. Her environment, rather than her chronological age, collapsed her internal timeline. Similarly, under intense stress or sudden danger, people describe seconds stretching out into slow-motion minutes. Arithmetic cannot account for these erratic, rubbery shifts in our perception. The proportional model is a useful bird's-eye view, but it treats the human brain like a static calculator. It fails to capture the day-to-day reality of how we construct our past. To understand why a summer in childhood felt like a lifetime and why last year went by in a flash, we must look past the calendar. The real explanation lies in the biological machinery of the brain itself, specifically in how we pay attention, how we process surprise, and how our neurons actively write the story of our lives. When you look back at childhood, your memory bank is crowded with vivid, distinct landmarks. Think of your first day of school, learning to ride a bicycle, or seeing the ocean for the very first time. Every single week brought an entirely new experience, forcing the brain to create highly detailed, separate memory files. This represents a high memory density, the sheer volume of unique information your mind encodes during a given period. When you ask your brain to estimate how long a past year lasted, it does not consult a stopwatch. Instead, it looks backward and counts these mental files. If a period is packed with novel, emotionally charged milestones, your brain assumes that period must have been long. There are simply more separate pages to flip through. As we grow older, however, our days lose these firsts. We fall into predictable patterns. We commute along the same streets, perform the same work tasks, and eat similar meals. In this state of repetition, the brain switches to an efficiency mode. Because nothing unexpected happens, it stops writing detailed new files. It has no reason to record the same Tuesday 50 times over. This efficiency has a massive effect on our retrospective sense of time. Routine does not just make the present feel dull, it actively prevents the brain from separating one week from the next in memory. When you look back at a year of routine, your brain finds only a few distinct landmarks instead of hundreds. With so little recorded data, your mind concludes that the entire year was short, compressing months of lived experience into a single, fleeting blur. The unsettling truth is that time is not actually accelerating. We are simply leaving fewer footprints in our own minds to mark its passing. Picture an exhausted mother rocking a crying infant in a dark nursery at 3 o'clock in the morning. Each tick of the wall clock feels like a heavy, deliberate thud. The minutes stretch into hours, and the night feels entirely endless. In this state of intense fatigue, her attention is completely locked onto the passage of time itself. Psychologists Dan Zakai and Richard Block categorize this experience as prospective timing, the way we judge duration while we are actively trapped inside it. When your mind is highly aroused by stress, anxiety, or emotional intensity, you pay hyper-close attention to every passing second. Your internal pacemaker speeds up, making the agonizing present drag on forever. But fast forward to that child's first birthday. Looking back, that same mother feels as though the entire year vanished in the blink of an eye. This is the retrospective judgment of time, how we reconstruct the past after it has already slipped away. Here lies the great paradox of human consciousness. A demanding, emotionally intense period can feel incredibly elongated while you are living it, yet strangely compressed once it becomes a memory. While the mother was in the trenches of early parenthood, her brain was highly focused on survival, tracking every slow hour of sleeplessness. Yet because those exhausting days often fell into a highly repetitive routine of feeding, diapering, and rocking, the brain did not write a vast library of unique, distinct memory files. When she looks backward, her mind finds only a blur of similar events, causing the entire year to collapse into a single fleeting chapter. This delicate tension between the grueling now and the vanishing then serves as our bridge from psychology to neurobiology, proving that our perception of time is never fixed. Our brains do not possess a physical stopwatch. Instead, they must actively construct an estimate of every passing second. To explain how this happens, scientists often point to a classic model called scalar expectancy theory. Imagine an internal pacemaker deep within your brain that constantly emits electrical pulses, like a metronome. Beside it sits an accumulator, a biological counter that keeps track of how many pulses have gathered. When you try to guess how much time has passed, your mind simply counts the accumulated ticks. But this metronome does not tick at a fixed rate. Its speed is heavily modulated by a single chemical messenger, dopamine. When dopamine levels are high, your internal metronome beats faster. It packs more ticks into each physical second, stretching out the present. When dopamine levels drop, the metronome slows down. Fewer ticks are registered, meaning physical hours can slip by while your internal counter has barely moved. This timing network operates in a deep, horseshoe-shaped structure of the brain called the striatum. The striatum acts as a central hub, reading the rhythmic oscillations of surrounding brain cells. Under the striatal beat frequency model, the striatum reads these neural rhythms like a conductor, listening for a specific synchronized beat to mark when an interval has ended. This biological clockwork directly alters how we experience aging. Over the course of adulthood, our brains naturally lose about 6 to 13% of our striatal dopamine receptors every decade. With less dopamine to fuel the system, our internal pacemaker begins to drag. It ticks slower. And when your internal clock ticks slower than the physical world around you, external time seems to rush past at a dizzying speed. This mechanical drag explains why children and adults live in two different temporal realities. A young child with rich dopamine reserves has a fast-running internal clock that registers every fraction of a second. An older adult, operating on a slower neural rhythm, registers fewer internal ticks over the exact same period, making the physical day feel shorter. A 35-year-old project manager spends her weeks managing complex deadlines, responding to hundreds of emails, and coordinating back-to-back meetings. Her calendar is completely full, and her daily schedule is relentless. Yet when she looks back at the last 6 months, the entire block of time seems to have vanished into a gray, featureless mist. This is the great illusion of adulthood. A life overflowing with activity can still fail to leave a lasting trace. To understand why, we have to look at the brain not as a clock, but as a recorder. Inside the medial temporal lobe sits the hippocampus, a structure that acts as the brain's archivist. Within its CA1 region, a population of specialized neurons known as time cells keeps track of sequence. First identified in 2011, These cells fire in a strict sequential chain during gaps in experience. They provide a physical, neural scaffold for ordering events, allowing the mind to map out exactly when one moment ended and the next began. With age, however, this recording machinery loses its focus. The physical structure of the hippocampus naturally undergoes subtle changes, and the precision of these time cell sequences begins to degrade. In older brains, the firing windows of these cells expand and become less reliable. The clean lines of the temporal scaffold blur, and the chronological order of our memories becomes less stable. When this scaffold loses its fidelity, the past feels less segmented. For the busy professional, 30 identical workdays are compressed into a single generic category. Because the neural archivist failed to stamp each day with a distinct temporal tag, the brain cannot separate the weeks. The clock in her brain is still ticking, but the recorder is no longer marking the boundaries between the chapters of her life. Consider a man in his 70s sitting on a quiet porch, watching the afternoon light fade. His calendar is no longer packed with the frantic milestones of his youth, the career promotions, the property purchases, the constant pressure to accumulate. Instead, his days are defined by a quiet rhythm: morning coffee at the same diner, a walk through the neighborhood park, phone calls with family. To a younger observer, this repetitive routine might seem like a recipe for empty time. But psychologists studying the aging mind recognize a different shift at play. Laura Carstensen formulated this as socio-emotional selectivity theory, which shows that our perception of time is shaped by our subjective distance from the horizon. When we are young, we view the future as vast and open-ended. We prioritize gathering information, building networks, and preparing for what lies ahead. But as our future time horizon shrinks, our goals naturally pivot. We stop collecting experiences for tomorrow and start seeking immediate emotional satisfaction today. This shift in priorities changes how we experience the clock. A retiree may choose comfort in familiar rituals, which can make the weeks blend together without distinct milestones. But this repetition is a conscious preference for meaningful connection over novel noise. The rapid passage of these years is more than a biological breakdown of the brain's recording systems. It is the natural result of a mind that has quietly decided to stop counting and start savoring. Time accelerates because we filter out the unnecessary, leaving behind a life measured not by the density of our memory files, but by the warmth of our peace. There is no chemical fountain of youth that can freeze the hands of a clock. But science offers a practical tool set to alter how we experience its passage. First, consider the weekly novelty challenge. By actively introducing one unfamiliar activity every week, whether testing a new recipe, exploring an unfamiliar street, or learning a simple skill, we trigger hippocampal pathways. This builds distinct neural landmarks that stretch our retrospective memory of the past. Second, employ micro-journaling. Recording just 3 brief, specific events every evening prevents the weeks from collapsing into a featureless blur. When you look back at the month, your brain finds clear anchors to measure, expanding your sense of elapsed time. Third, practice brief moments of focused attention. Taking 5 minutes to simply track your breathing calms your internal pacemaker and sharpens your immediate perspective experience of the present. These practices are grounded in synthesized findings from cognitive psychology, behavioral neuroscience, and gerontology, with complete references provided in the description below. They show that while we cannot stop physical time, we can change how we encode it. Time does not actually accelerate. Our brains simply stop recording. The answer is not a miracle cure, but a conscious shift in how we live and remember our days. By choosing to build new landmarks, we can reclaim the expansive, endless summers of our youth. Choose one of these 3 experiments to test this week and share your results in the comments below to join the collective study of the human clock. We cannot stop the clock, but we can change how we live within its ticks. By actively chasing novelty, we force our brains to slow down and truly remember. Time will always march forward, but its depth is entirely up to you. How will you stretch your days starting tomorrow? Let me know in the comments below.